Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Femventures. Leonie and myself are both working for the internal startup incubator within SAP, and we're deeply passionate about female leadership and entrepreneurship, which is the main reason that we are hosting this podcast. We want to put a spotlight on some of the most adventurous women in tech that we encounter through the work we do at SAP and share their stories with you, so that you can get inspired yourself, as well as hopefully taking away some practical insights to get started on your own journey.
Today's episode is centered around a topic that we think isn't just interesting, but also highly relevant in the current world. We're going to talk about gender and diversity issues and how artificial intelligence can empower underrepresented communities through inclusive algorithms in the future. Our guest on the show today is Kishau Rogers, a serial entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in tech. Welcome, Kishau. We're super excited to have you with us today. Would be great if you could maybe introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm glad to be here. So my bio, I've been in tech, I guess, over 25 years now. It's been a while. I started my career as a programmer and evolved from there to an entrepreneur, actually running a tech company. So my background is in computer science, and my specialty is building enterprise software and also using artificial intelligence to amplify solutions. I'm currently the CEO of Time Study. We're an enterprise software company. We service the healthcare industry and helping them understand how people spend their time at work. And my mission is to help people wrangle complexity. I often say that. So healthcare is a very complex sector to work in, and there are a lot of opportunities with data. So I get a chance to work alongside some really bright people every day.
Thanks for the intro, Kishau, and what an impressive life journey and mission you have for yourself. Really looking forward to our conversation today. Maybe before we dive into the topic, Lisa and I always like to get to know our guests a little bit better by asking the same question to start with. So, Kishau, what's something that you're not good at?
It sounds like a trick interview question. Something, you know how people reframe it to be like an asset. But something I'm not good at. Oh goodness, it's not that I don't think I'm not good at things, but I will say when I'm hiring team members, I tend to hire people that can round out my skill set gaps. So one of the things that it's not that I'm not good at it, it's just I'm not as focused on it, is legal. Legal is something that I could never be a lawyer. Honestly, I don't think I could. And I really admire lawyers, but to the degree that they have to, tease out words and phrases and their addendums, and it just drives me up a wall. So that's something that I often say is not my ministry. And I depend on very smart lawyers to help us along the way.
Yeah. I think we all are glad that there are lawyers and good lawyers, because they also deserve my full admiration. I can definitely understand you there. Great. As I said in the beginning, and as you shared yourself, you're a serial entrepreneur. You have a deep background in computer science. You have over 25 years of experience in tech. What actually got you interested in tech in the first place?
That's a great question. So when I started my studies in computer science, honestly, I was very curious about, and this was a long time ago, so keep that in mind. This was, my daughter refers to this as the 1900s, but I was in computer science program in the 1990s is when I was a student at the university. I was just really interested in computers and how they work. I was really good at math. And so, it just seemed like a thing that was interesting to study. So that's how I got into it. And the reason that I stayed was that I saw a huge opportunity to use technology to solve problems. And I consider myself a problem solver. So that's why I stayed in computer science for that reason.
Great. And we'll talk about some of those problems that we can solve through tech later on today. I can imagine that your life is probably a busy one with all the different initiatives that you're juggling and running at the same time. Do you have anything that helps you keep focus in your daily life? Do you have something like a mantra or a North Star that allows you to really focus on what's important?
Yeah, I like the phrase North Star. I would say I have a North Star, not a mantra. But for me, it's staying track, staying on top of everything is an ongoing practice for me. And the way I structure my week is Mondays and Fridays, I think, are great days to both plan. Your priorities for the week. And then Fridays for me are days where I actually reflect on my progress. So I actually block out time on my calendar to take a step back and look at all of the things. I'm a mom, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a wife, and there are a lot of things going on in life. Also, I'm an advisor and I'm a mentor. So the week can get really busy. So at the beginning of the week is when in engineering, engineers do daily stand-ups. I do the same thing in my life for me. I actually do a stand up with myself to discuss what I accomplished last week, to reflect on my goals for this week, and also to identify any perceived bottlenecks or barriers. And I begin my week with trying to unblock any bottlenecks or barriers. I always focus on the next step because there's so much to be done every day that I find that it could be overwhelming if you're focusing on all of the things at once. So I've trained my brain to focus on the next step in front of me. And that's how I basically manage it all. Also, support systems are important. So as a part of that reflection of what my priorities are and what I plan to do and what the bottlenecks are, I always ask myself who can help. And that's basically how I manage my whole life.
Thanks. Yeah, that sounds like two great tips already. Having the daily stand up with oneself and also having a good support system in place to help juggle through the week. Nice. Maybe we can now dive a bit more into the actual topic for today, which is about AI, artificial intelligence, and its possibilities. And as context, it's definitely not a secret that AI-based technologies and applications are thriving, and they offer, on the one hand, tremendous opportunities to build stronger and more efficient businesses and improve the world and solve problems, as you said. But they can be used, for example, to fight epidemics, to combat corruption, to name a few examples, but also they can be used to empower diversity and inclusion. So for those who are not familiar, could you maybe share a bit more about what AI exactly is and what in your mind are the different ways that it can potentially be used to empower diversity and inclusion?
Sure. I think the easiest way to define AI is it's a discipline of computer science that intends to train a computer to think and learn as a human will. And there are certain phases of AI. A lot of people, when they think of artificial intelligence, they're thinking of science fiction movies where the computers are taking over the world and replacing humans in every job. We're actually not there yet in society. So most artificial intelligence is designed to solve a very specific problem and to learn how to solve a very specific problem. So that's the definition of artificial intelligence, is really using machines in a way that allows them to learn, think, and act like humans. In terms of diversity and how it can be used to empower diversity and inclusion, I would say, my perspective, and just for, your audience and people that don't know, I'm a Black woman working in tech, and I'm a woman of a certain age. So I've seen like many phases of the computer science and technology sector. I've seen it go through a lot of phases, and there's a little bit more diversity in the sector, but not as much as we'd like to see. So, for example, I believe that only about 22% of AI professionals around the globe are female, which is, that's an abysmal statistic. So one of the things that it can be used for is to help people learn, I would say, to study the data to learn why that's the case. I don't think AI can be used right now to solve that problem. And the reason why I say that is because I don't think people know how to solve the problem. Also, we have a very serious issue with training computers with biased data sets. And so I would say AI is a good tool to help people learn about bias. As we work through using the technology to solve these problems, we should have practices in place that allow our teams to see how an AI can become biased using biased data sets, but then also having conversations around why that's the case. And so that's my perspective of how AI can be used to empower people, to use, to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives is really just having the conversation. At some point, from a DEI standpoint, I think, yes, certainly, AI can be used to solve those problems. But, the AI is intended to amplify a solution. And what you see a lot are people throwing the technology at problems and expecting it to just solve it. So you kind of have to solve it on the ground first and understand the mechanics of the solution before you just launch an AI, to solve it for you. So that's really my perspective of most artificially intelligent systems is I believe engineers should take responsibility for thinking through the solution and not expecting the technology to figure it out.
I think you absolutely made a great point there, Kishau, that we can't just expect technology to solve a real world problem for us. Are there any risks that you see that could be a result of kind of relying on this approach of inclusive AI?
Yeah. I think the risk currently is the inability for, and this is for everyone that works in tech. Sometimes we hide behind the machine or behind the code, depending on your job in tech. And the inability of us wanting to stand in front of the problem, take responsibility for what the issues are, and then to develop solutions and then to amplify those. And so the danger currently is that people immediately go into this like building and developing and launching phase before they've had a chance to really think about the landscape of the problem that they're working on. Also, there's, a tendency to not include the people that would be impacted by the inclusive AI solution. So if you're building a solution to solve a problem for a community of people, they should absolutely be involved in thinking about how that solution works because it actually impacts them. So I'm a huge fan of cross-disciplinary teams. When people are solving problems with technology, always there should be someone on that team that actually represents the people that you're going to impact, because that's how you actually learn how the technology could potentially have these negative impacts. And you want to learn that before you launch. We've seen too much in the news where people are launching things and then they cause harm and then everyone's like, oops, we didn't realize it, and it's just because it's not on the radar. And it's understandable that people are thinking about, the job that they have and the role that they have, but someone has to sort of float above, and really look at the 30,000 foot view of the problem that you're solving and how it impacts society. So that's the danger, is that we're very, very, we have a tendency to go straight for the AI, straight for the building and developing. And I understand it because it's really sexy to do that and it's trending and everyone wants to be on trend, but we do need to build in some time to learn the landscape of the problems that we're solving.
And also I think part of that consequence of people not necessarily being very familiar with AI yet, but it being also a very trendy topic, like you say, I think as a cause of that, AI in general is often polarized between, good versus evil, which is probably a bit too black and white, because we also think that, many biases rather show up in small ways in our everyday experiences. And I was wondering whether you could give a few practical examples that you maybe see yourself in the emergence of, be it racial, gender, or socioeconomic biases in some of our recent technologies.
Yeah, there's several, and we're learning about how to navigate the space every day. But we see a lot of it in, like hiring and recruiting systems is an example that I use a lot when I train machine learning students. I recall there was a pretty large global company that created an AI to help them understand who the best job candidates would be for their open roles. And they learned after it was launched that the tool had a bias against against women candidates. And it was because of the way the solution was developed. They actually trained the system on data that represented their historical hiring practices. And this particular company, I've just mentioned that only 22% of people in AI are women. So this particular company didn't have a huge representation of women employees historically. So the AI machines look for patterns, and the machine actually recognized a pattern of hiring certain types of candidates. And so that's where the bias showed up. And the teams that develop these things are often mostly, largely male. And sometimes people just aren't thinking about that until it's actually launch. So you see it a lot there. Another example could be facial recognition technology. Read about that a lot. I know there's an initiative in New York City now to help train some of the algorithms because, a lot of times people with darker skin tones may be misrepresented, or the computer may not recognize or mislabel a person with the darker skin tone. So sometimes those systems are trained using certain images, and they're not always representative of the community that you're trying to serve. So those are some examples of, good intentions gone wrong. And it happens a lot. You see it a lot too in the business space. And I often tell, our customers and prospective clients that, a good AI built on top of an ineffective workflow or a broken and biased system is only going to accelerate and amplify the problem. And so that's why it's important that, people really think about the problem before they start using the technology. The technology is just a tool to amplify the solution. And so it's not that AI is good or bad or evil, and it's not that it's ready or not ready. It's whether the people that are working on it are ready and know what they need to know in order to use it.
You mentioned things like hiring and recruiting a couple of times, for example. So I was wondering whether, in your capacity as CEO, are there any concrete initiatives that you are taking yourself in your company or in the work that you do to ensure or to strengthen that diversity? And if you do you have any concrete tips or advice for any of our listeners on what they could do in their roles today or to already make a difference?
Yeah. So two things come to mind. One is more of an internal reflection. So one is really reflecting on the type of talent that you're looking for, and I would recommend that people challenge any assumptions that they may have about what is a great fit. So that's the first step. Sometimes we assume that a person working in a certain role must have a certain type of degree from a certain university or must live in a certain place. Actually take time to challenge those assumptions and maybe even talk to more like people like you that are hiring people like that to see what types of people they're hiring. And that storytelling actually broadens your perspective of what's possible in the roles that you're hiring. So that's the first thing that I would say. And an example, just to give a practical example, is in the tech space. A lot of times we're hiring engineers, and sometimes, there's a requirement that an engineer needs a bachelor's degree minimum from universities. And I've met some amazing engineers that do not have a college degree, but they have great experience. It's amazing experience. So challenging that type of thing is first. Secondly, you need to really broaden where you source talent, which is something that I do. I mentioned, I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman. And so some of the things that other companies are looking for is just instinctive to me because my network has a lot of people that look like me in it. But what I do is I actually connect connect to a diverse group of networks for myself so that I can see a diverse group of talent. So if you're sourcing talent from specific websites or certain organizations, I would challenge you to actually look in a diverse pool of talent sources. And that's really the first step is, really challenging what you think you're looking for, having that conversation internally regarding what's possible. I would look around to see what's possible if you're unaware of that. And then looking for more inclusive and diverse spaces to source talent from. That's really the first step to having diversity. But then there's also another step. So it's not enough just to hire people that represent a diverse population or underrepresented people. You have to figure out how to keep them on board. And so a lot of that requires programs, and you almost need people, whether it's a contractor or a person in your organization. You need a person that's focused on retention of employees. And you need to pay attention to your retention rates of the diversity of employees that you have to see if you notice any patterns of people being hired and leaving, because that could be a signal that they don't feel included. They were hired, but maybe they don't feel included, or maybe they don't feel that there's a pathway for promotion. So that's the next step that's really important as well.
Yeah, definitely. I especially love your take on challenging your own assumptions and how one can expand what's possible through that. I'd like to now come back to your own journey. We've gotten a glimpse into your entrepreneurial pathway in tech. You're currently being the founder and CEO of Time Study, as mentioned before. I'm sure that along the way, you must have experienced some kind of challenges or difficulties. And did you have any specific failures or flops that you mastered? And more importantly, what were your learnings? What did you learn from these?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can go in a million directions with this one. I think because I've been working for a while. So Time Study is my third business. It's my third company, and it's my first venture-backed company. So my first two companies I bootstrapped, or it was funded by like grant sources and research. This fundraising was a journey. And I could go in a million directions with why that is, but you're probably aware of the statistics of the percentage of women that actually receive venture capital is, I believe, below 2%. And if you look at Black women, it's like point something, 0.6 or something. It's really low. And so navigating that landscape was really challenging to me. We were able to raise the funding that we need ultimately, but I had a lot to learn about what I was getting into. In terms of flops and failures, I think everyone has them. I call them lessons. It's the same thing, but everyone has them. But there are tons. Like hiring the right people, I think, is one that is critically important. That's why, I said you need to broaden the stories that you have around who is possible to hire. So hiring, delegating, as a person that is very independent thinking, I had to learn to delegate a lot of things that I hold on to. But I could keep going. There are tons of lessons that I've learned along the way in the last 25 years, and I've been in business 15 years. So I'm grateful that I'm continuing to learn each day.
So we could have another episode with you just on the life lessons.
We go on for an hour about that.
You mentioned your support system before when talking about navigating your daily life. I'm sure that this system also includes mentors. What is maybe the best piece of advice that you've received from one of your mentors?
Oh God, I get incredible advice every day from my mentor. I'm thinking best advice. I can't think of anything that stands out, but I can tell you a general theme. It's building a team. A part of that is really understanding your own secret sauce. And I would say that the best gift that I've been given from my mentors is they've been able to give me a lens of how they see me. I think sometimes when we're working, it's hard for you to know how other people see you. And we're often really very hard on ourselves because we all have goals, and we just talked about flops and failures. And so sometimes your days are spent thinking about those things, but outside looking in, people can recognize like your gifts and talents. So I would say having mentors is a great way for for you to understand how you're presenting in the world. That's been the biggest gift that I've had. And it's allowed me to understand who is possible for me to work with and who would be great to align with.
Yeah, that's a good segue to the next question I wanted to raise. If you have maybe one or two specific recommendations or pieces of advice that you would give to women specifically who want a career in tech.
Yeah, I say if you're already working, a working professional, so that there are these certain pathways when people talk about getting more women in tech. One is, at a very young age, studying computer science in high school and getting into some of those programs. And others are, working professionals that want to maybe pivot their careers into tech. And so I would say seek out mentorship. That's the first advice I would give. And then somehow you have to find a way to get started. So there are problems all around us. How can you actually find a small problem that you can solve with tech? That's a really good way to learn tech, is actually using it on something that you care about. And that's the advice that I give a lot of young professionals is, where are you using tech in your day-to-day life? Where would you like to use it? And just making some time to immerse yourself in it will help you actually get into the field quicker. Certainly mentorship is important because a mentor can help you navigate your own environment. Like if you're trying to get into the tech division of your company, you want to find an advisor or a mentor that can help you understand what it takes to do that.
And apart from those, pieces of advice and very helpful recommendations that I'm sure our listeners will appreciate, are there maybe some kind of resources that have helped you along the way, in the sense of any, podcasts as you listen to, maybe books that you can recommend, or tools or apps that you use that you think could be useful?
Yeah. Yeah, I read a lot, and I have a blog, bigthinking.io. I have a book list on there that has tons of books. I tend to read different types of books, and I actually recommend that anyone that's interested in tech broaden their bookcase a bit. So I read fiction and nonfiction now because it requires a different use of your brain. We tend to scan nonfiction books, and fiction, you have to immerse yourself. So it's a different muscle that you're exercising. One of my favorite books is Thinking in Systems, because I consider myself a systems thinker, and that's really my approach to technology, is really thinking holistically about where the solution sits in the world. So I recommend that book because I think it's a fundamental book in understanding how to think about systems. In terms of podcasts, like I'm a podcast nut. I've stepped away from it a bit because there's just so much. There's so many podcasts. But my favorite, one of my favorites is Seth Godin's podcast, Akimbo, because I think he is a brilliant thinker. I like to listen to how he thinks about, and he talks a lot about some of the tech solutions that are in the world, and he sort of unpacks it from both a tech and a business perspective. So I think that one is a great one. And I could keep going. I'm a book nerd and a tool nerd. In terms of tools, there are different sites. I used to teach a course on O'Reilly's Safari online, but there's certainly other comparable sites that allow you to learn technology. So if you want to learn something like some fundamental skills, I recommend Safari Online, of course, because I'm an instructor there. But there are others like I think Udemy is the academy that does. There's Code Academy. There are many of them, but I would look for that if you're looking for technical training.
Definitely make sure to link all of them in the show notes. One last question before we round it up. If you could turn back the time and give advice or talk to your 18-year-old self, what is the main message that you would have for her?
Oh goodness, that's a great question. I have to think way back. I'm
sure it's not that long ago.
Yeah, no, it's not that long ago. I think it would be to have more fun. Like, it can get really intense, particularly if you're an entrepreneur or if you're leading a team. At some point in your life, work becomes so intense that I think we forget to have fun. So that's the advice I would honestly give my 18-year-old self. I felt like I spent my 20s just like grinding through work. So just make time to have more fun, travel more. And it helps you at work. when you have time to like broaden your perspective on the world and see more of the world and have more experiences.
Speaking of fun, thank you so much, Kishau. It's actually been super fun talking to you, and we could probably continue the conversation for much, much longer. Thanks for sharing your story, your experiences, as well as some life lessons. It was definitely inspiring to listen to, and we deeply appreciate that you came on our show today. For our listeners, thanks for joining. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast to keep on hearing about all things related to inclusive entrepreneurship and leadership. So stay tuned and see you next time.